You have felt it every time. That hunger, the kind no amount of scrolling satisfies.
I'm not religious, but I spent 2 years trying to understand why standing in an 800-year-old empty room felt more real than my actual life. We have made a world terrified of emptiness. Silence? You buy it through headphones. Awe? 30-second drone clips. Meaning? An algorithm. Why humans everywhere, across time, culture, and belief, keep building places like this? And why even now people who no longer believe still enter them? In this film, I don't want to talk about religion. I want to talk about something deeper. Why we build sacred spaces, what they do to the human mind, and what happens when we no longer have them. Because maybe we were never really building them for God. Maybe we were building them for ourselves. So let's walk into one, not as believers, as human beings. Let's notice what it does to us. There is a strange hunger many of us carry now. A hunger not for excitement, but for depth. Not for noise, but for presence. Not for more, but for something that finally feels enough. And when we don't know how to name that hunger, we anesthetize it. With speed, with content, with constant stimulation. But for most of human history, we did something very different. Across continents, across cultures, across thousands of years, humans built places not to entertain the mind, but to disturb it, to humble it, to slow it, to silence it. We built sacred spaces. And this is where the question really begins. Do we enter places like this because we believe, or because we are trying to? Because something inside us knows there is more to experience than survival and distraction. Why did civilizations that struggled to eat spend centuries raising stone toward the sky? Why did they carve darkness, echo, height, light, symmetry, not for comfort, but for awe? When you enter a sacred space like this, the first thing it does is make you feel small. Not small in a bad way. Small in the way you feel when you look up at the night sky full of endless stars and suddenly wonder, why do I exist here on this tiny planet, floating in something so vast your mind can't even hold it? Your ego shrinks, your worries shrink, your sense of self-importance shrinks. And in that moment, something unexpected happens. The noise inside you softens, the pressure loosens, the weight you didn't know you were carrying slides off your shoulders, because you don't have to be the center of everything anymore. You don't have to control the universe. You're just part of it. And somehow, this doesn't feel scary. It feels like relief. Why is that? The architecture dictates your pace. It forces slowness. You hear yourself. You feel the stone. You can't rush. You know this feeling? When you're standing in nature early in the morning in spring, and for a moment, you stop trying to get somewhere. That's this, but 800 years old. Sacred spaces like this don't overwhelm the senses. They refine them. Light isn't just entering, it's being slowed, painted onto the floor. Sound doesn't scatter here, it gathers. Even a whisper can cross the whole space. This is not accidental. This is architecture shaping the mind, a sensory world reduced to what matters: stone, glass, smoke, light, and you inside it. This is a psychological technology. Different beliefs, different continents, same DNA. So what happened? We replaced architecture of awe with architecture of engagement, and we wonder why we're starving. Here's the hopeful part. The technology is transferable. You don't need a cathedral. You just need to know how they work. I tried an experiment. 1 month. No productivity hacks, just this question. How do I build micro-sacred spaces in ordinary life? Not buildings, temporal architectures. 15 minutes. Coffee, window, no phone, just letting the world exist without my commentary. Evening walks. No podcast filling my head. Just a body. Moving through space. Noticing. The doorway pause, literally stopping before entering my home, shedding the noise. Sounds simple? It was terrifying. Because silence isn't hard. but stepping outside the patterns that keep us comfortable is. We cling to our noise, our habits, our familiar distractions. And when those fall away, we finally meet what's underneath. And I started seeing them everywhere, sacred spaces. Not because a priest blessed them, because I brought a different quality of attention. You know that moment when you're in a hurry, and then suddenly you just stop and actually look at the sky, or at the night sky where the distance feels endless. In that moment, something softens. Your urgency shrinks. Your self-importance loosens. The world gets bigger, and you get quieter inside it. That's it. That's the whole thing. Here's what I think these great sacred spaces were really about. Not reaching God, reaching past ourselves. St. Sava wasn't built in one lifetime. It began, stopped, waded through wars, regimes, decades of silence, and still people came back to it. Every generation added something, a dome, a mosaic, a repair, a continuation. It grew like a living thing, recording belief, interruption, return. The ones who began this knew they would never stand beneath the finished dome. They built anyway. They trusted a future they would never see. We have forgotten how to do that. But it's still here, in these spaces, in the people who still come. Not because they have answers, but because they're willing to sit with the questions. And that takes more faith than any doctrine. And maybe that's what faith really is. Not certainty, not answers, but acting as if the future matters, even when you won't be there to see it. Every generation builds something it will never live inside. Stone, stories, ideas, signals sent forward in time. A quiet agreement with people we'll never meet. Some build with stone, some build with imagination. History didn't stand still. In the 16th century, something shifted. Some said God does not live in stone, but in conscience, not in architecture, but in the individual. And maybe they were pointing to something profound. Maybe sacred spaces were never the destination. Maybe they were training grounds, places that taught us how to be still, how to pay attention, how to step beyond ourselves. Maybe the real cathedral was always the one behind the eyes, our consciousness, a universe vast enough for fear, time, memory, love, infinity. Maybe sacred space isn't somewhere we enter. Maybe it's something we learn to become. So, do sacred spaces exist? Yes. But their true location isn't on a map. They exist in the architecture of attention. The sacred isn't a place you go. It's a way of seeing. We built monuments because we needed help remembering. We still do. Not to give us answers, but to hold us in the space of not knowing, to remind us that before belief, before identity, before all the noise, we are creatures who look at the horizon and feel a quiet, wordless wonder. This is the first in a series about the monuments we build, outside and within. If you felt that hunger for depth, for silence, for meaning, you're already part of this. Next time, we go somewhere familiar, a place of movement, waiting, departure, a modern cathedral of transition. We're going to the airport,